Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you very much. We've established that the transition period will be an opportunity for the United Kingdom and the European Union to turn the 20 pages of the political declaration that we'll have, I guess, by the end of the summit on the 25th of November into 1,600 pages by the 31st of December 2020. My first question is, isn't that an absolute pipe dream to believe that it's possible to turn a political declaration of 20 pages on the 25th of November now into an international treaty of that detail and importance, particularly given the fact that next year is going to be a year of tremendous institutional and political change in Brussels. So can you just sort of give me your overall assessment of the extent to which that is realistic, or is it just fantasy politics?
I think looking at the normal length that trade negotiations go through, I think I've always favoured an extension, a possibility to extend the transition period, and I'm happy that it's in there now, because I think it's a pipe dream to do it within the original period. Although I also have to confess that I'm quite impressed by how quickly they negotiated a whole UK customs union, which quite frankly I think none of us would have thought possible either. So if there's enough pressure, speed can work, and I think it's quite... I've read that the UK is trying to convince the EU to pass a mandate rather quickly on doing the negotiations. I would urge the government to do that and to get that out of the way before politics take over in the EU, so that at least at some level negotiations can already work and can continue to work. And then within the extended time frame, I think it's still tough, but my hope is it would be possible to get at least the main things done.
My sense is that it would be a tall order to negotiate the future relationship in 20 months. I think it's rather unlikely. And in fact, at some point, I found a guide to international negotiations, which said, and actually it was, I think, an official EU guide saying, reaching a final agreement usually takes several years, we know that, and it involves over 30 stages from getting Council's authorization to entering into force. And knowing that the EU's procedure, basically machinery, also takes time to speed up things, I think it's rather...
So there's a strong consensus that an extension to the transition period will be required. Yeah. That decision has to be made and finalised by June of 2020, doesn't it?
July?
June, July 2020.
July, but
by July.
I think it's July. Mm-hmm. Let's look at 132.
So would it be accurate to say that the cliff edge that we face in terms of getting these negotiations finalised as a third country under Article 218, the cliff edge could well be in June 2020, not in December 2020? Assuming that an extension to the transition period is going to be required, and that decision, according to the withdrawal agreement, has to be made by June or July of 2020.
Yes, but this is the qualification of cliff edge. I mean, you will already have... We have seen what happens in this negotiation for the withdrawal agreements, meaning that it was blocked during a long time, for factors I'm not going to cover here, but the perspective was not clear from the beginning. If we have already a mandate, if we have already functioning institutions, already a mandate at the beginning of negotiations, if the UK from day one and the EU from day one know what they want, you can already do a lot of things. And you must also keep in mind that there is this possibility sometimes that we have used in the past, for example, for the coming Eastern countries and more recently for Ukraine, that you are cutting a part which is the core of the agreement, which is trade, and you push it directly. This could also be done if there was a worry at the time. So it's a huge endeavor, but sometimes the machine can go quickly if both partners know clearly what they want. and you have still this option of disconnecting parts of the deal. But you're right. I mean, it will not be a cliff edge in July, but there will need to be a clear perspective if you don't have the extension, how you use the remaining time.
And could you just give an assessment of the extent to which it would be the negotiating time would be shortened, truncated, if there were to be a shift in negotiating objectives towards a European Economic Area Norway-style deal? How long would that take to negotiate during a transition period compared to some kind of bespoke deal or Canada plus a backstop, or all of these other options for the negotiating objectives? If the UK and the EU were to change the political declaration, for example, to explicitly commit to European Economic Area as the destination, would it be realistic to expect that could be negotiated relatively easily well before December 2020?
I believe yes, because you have already then a defined model. Of course, if you want to make something bespoke, well,
it takes longer.
It takes longer.
By definition.
But you can simplify this because we have a magnificent catalogue of external agreements. So even if I could already tell you, you could take a part of this. Yes. No, there is a huge experience. There is a huge body. If there is the political will, I can tell you, and you speak yourself, because there is this EEA model, but Canada is also a model, and Ukraine is also a model. So you have already a lot of things that can be, because you know the material, the EU and the UK are not very far from each apart at the beginning. If you want to cut a lot through this jungle, this is possible. But nonetheless, of course, if someone decided to add an option after the backstop, after the whole customs union, etc., it's possible. And the fact is that the system of the EEA is already well known, and it is a collective one. So you could imagine that, and it has much more practice, because the deep trade cooperation agreements that we have now, most of them have not functioned a lot of years. You see, for example, the example of Ukraine, and a fortiori Japan, Singapore, etc. In EEA, you have already the code, you have already the institutional building, you have already the list of directives. Of course, from the legal point of view, it simplifies your life a lot.
If I may just a very quick point, I think it's important to make this distinction. In theory, yes, having a template makes your life easier, but there will be some political constraints, as in each negotiations, and especially in the European Economic Area, we sometimes tend to forget about non-EU partners which will want to have a say. Norway will not be the big fish in the pond any longer, so I don't know why I'm referring to fish. But just to say, there will be some political constraints and pressure.
And I just wanted to add, the customs union, of course, will be an additional thing to discuss at that stage, because that's the single market, but that wouldn't resolve the customs union. But
well, you'd require a derogation from EFTA. In order to have a customs union whilst joining EEA through the EFTA pillar. But that's, in your legal opinion, that would be possible. I think
this is all feasible, particularly if we change the dialogue to a positive one. I think it will be very difficult if we say EFTA, but really just for a little bit, and nobody quite likes EFTA. I think then it will be difficult to convince Norway. It will be far easier if we say, this we can envisage this is our new home. We realize we will be the biggest person living in this house, and it will need to be refitted to some extent, but we can make it better for everyone. I think if that is the positive agenda, I think this should be absolutely possible, and also within the time frame.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Sammy Wilson.